oldest manufacturing process. I already discussed about the same point, and even today is the first step in the manufacturing most of the product done through the casting process. So it's based on the properties of liquid. Okay, so the raw material nature is a liquid. So to take up the shape of the vessels containing it. So what have containers? It have a circle, it have a square, it have some shape, complicated shape. It have some so whatever it is. So whatever we have the contains. So let me fabricate it through the casting methods. Okay, so product ranging from the few millimeter into the meter will be developed through the casting process, and also a few grams to we can able to develop some tons. Okay, so next very important for the casting process, the foundry is places where the metal is melted and castings are produced. Okay, so next the casting terms. So what are the terms we used for the fabrication process and the casting methods? So let me see one by one the keywords. So first one is a pattern. So pattern is a very important for the casting terms. So which means a replica of the part to be cast. So what the requirement we need. So that requirement is called as a pattern. So next one is a molding material. So which is supported by the patterns. Okay. So material that is packed around the patterns to provide the mold cavities. Okay. So next one is a flask. So the flask is nothing but rigid frame that hold the molding aggregates. So next one is a cope and tracks. So which is a top half of the pattern and bottom half of the patterns. Okay. So next one is a core. So core is mostly it's a sand or a metal shapes that's inserted into the mold to create the internal features. So core is nothing but to develop some cavities. Okay. So next one is a mold cavities. The mold cavity which is happen through the pattern as well as core. Okay, combinations of the mold material and cores. Okay, so the next one is a riser. Riser is one of the additional part added to the entire casting patterns. Okay, so the additional why the riser will fix on the system means the additional voids. The voids generally happen or generally produced while we are pouring on the molten material to the molten material mold. Okay, so that case that times we should avoid our voids through the risers. Okay, which provide the additional metals to compensate for the while the stinkages. These are very important points to avoid the external dimensions or excess dimensions. We should keep with the exact dimension with the help of the excess material through the rising materials. So next one is a catting systems. So why the catting system is very important means, so while we are pouring on the molten material through the mold cavity, so once the molten material to reach initially the molten material to reach the catting systems. So once they reach the catting system, after that the catting system will flow through the molten material to the cavity process. So the network of a channel that deliver the molten metal to the mold. Okay. So next pouring cup. It's just a carrying materials. Okay, so portion of the carrying system that control the delivery of the metals. Okay, it's just a carrying materials of the molten material. Sprue. So vertical portions of the carrying systems. So next one is a runner, is a horizontal one, and potting line is separations of cope and track box. So upper and bottom boxes we have to split out through the potting lines. So next one is steps involved in the casting process. So already we discussed about what are the basic steps are involved. So pattern making, pour making, and molding, melting, pouring, and cleaning and inspections. So the first step is a pattern fabrication process. So what's a pattern means? A full size of mold, okay, full size of mold of the part, slightly enlarged to account for the stinkages and machining allowances in the casting process. Okay. Generally, the pattern materials used for the wooden materials. Okay, somewhat costlier metal, more costlier pattern used for the metal. So some cases the compensations of a wooden metal is replaced with the help of the plastic patterns, but mostly the people are using the wooden materials alone. Okay, so next is gypsum cements, and the last one is waxing. So the wax is a precision casting methods. So these are types of patterns. So the first one is A. A is a solid pattern, which is a single piece. Okay. So next one is a split pattern, which is a two of the pattern. The whole this solid pattern going to be splitted into two of. So bottom and top. So this is a split pattern. Next one is a match split patterns, which means the shape of the mold, which is support to the upper plate and bottom plate. Okay, so based on the match plate, we can able to develop a product. Okay, so next one is a cope and drop box, which is quite costlier compared to the say solid and split and match plate. So this why we are using the cope and drop box pattern means we can able to develop some number of samples as well as more complicated shapes. So these solid and split pattern, say simple geometries we can generate, but the cope and drop box we can able to generate some complications shapes also we can produce. Okay, so next is sweep patterns and the skeleton patterns also develop some a number of patterns through the single passage of molten materials. So this is a core fabrications methods. How the core will produced means the core consists of two portions. One is a body of the core and another one is a more extensions of the called printers. Okay. So next the core are used to create the internal cavities, which that means the white color, the brown color is to fill with some sands, the white color is a core. Core which is produced to the internal cavities. Once we created the cavities, let we pour on the molten material through the riser to fill on the cavities. Okay. So next, the core is a separate entities are placed on the mold to produce the corresponding cavities or a hole or undercut into the castings. Okay. So next one is the core for sand casting are manufactured by the packing specially prepared sand is core box. So this is a very important for the special packed sands. So here we are going to not used in the normal sand. So for casting process we are going to use some special cases of sands. Okay. So let me see the special what's a special sand cast methods. Okay. So next one is a molding. So the molding is the cavity to support the cavity. Okay. The cavity is a sand mold is formed by the packing sand around the pattern. Then we separate the mold into the two half and remove the patterns. Okay. So I told this sand is some special sand we are using in the sand casting process. So what the special sand means? 85 to 90% is of silica sand maximum the 85 to 90% is available in the silica. So remaining 3 to some percentage bonding material, which means the clay material we have to use. So remaining 3 to 6% we have to add some water. So these three combinations of material which is going to be used for the to fill with the molding. Okay. So next one is melting methods. So the melting methods, generally the casting process used for the material is metal materials. Okay, so what's the raw material of the metal? Like a powder or like some raw rod or raw sheet, raw steels. Okay, so we already discussed in the sand casting process. One of the method is a molten material. So once we molten means we need some melting process. So the melting we have to done with the following methods. One is a cupola furnace and a direct fuel furred furnace, crucible furnace, electric arc furnace, and induction furnace. These are the different methods for melting of raw material of metal. Okay. So while the metal going to be molten time, let me consider for the pouring temperature, pouring rate, and turbulence. So these three factors to control the molten metal stages. Okay. So next one is a foundry. So this is very very important for the stages of molten material stage. So one is a metal stage foundry and another is sand foundries. In the metal means the metal raw material is a metal which is going to be melted and then handling to the molten metal to the pouring, then the sucking out to remove or avoider for the void formation, then finishing, then heat treatment for further to enhance the strength of the materials, then final to the inspections. So see the sand method. Once we using the sand of our raw material, sand going to be mixed our preparation to fill the molding, then going to be pouring of raw material of molten materials, then shaking out, then finishing, and then the heat treatment and then inspections. So the pouring, shaking out, these portions are commonly for the metal as well as sanding methods. Okay. The sanding for the sand method generally called as a molding sections, and metal called as a melting sections. Okay. So this is a general layout which is followed in the foundry sections. So there is a foundry stores. So let me enter into the foundry sections. So this is a furnace section. Once we metal has to be melted, then going to the melting sections. Once we melted melting material going to be pour and the coring making process. Okay. So next going to the molder ready. Before going to the core making, let me pour onto the mold with the help of the molten materials. Okay. Then then the samples going to be inspections. Okay. So let me see how the sand mold preparations. Okay. So initially the sand casting process. Before any casting can take place, a wooden pattern is made up precisely. Okay. So this is called pattern making, and in the industry this is a very skillful job, because so the wooden pattern is a very very simple and quite cheap, and we can prepared geometry with easily manners. Okay. So in any inaccuracy at this stage will result the final cast being to be a wrong or a even falling. Okay. So this is a plate, bottom plate, flat plate, while we fix the pattern and then track box over the flat plate. Okay. Track is placed inverted on the mold floor and the pattern is placed at the center of the box. Okay. So next, some particles. So what particle? This is a special casting sand which is poured onto the casting methods. Okay. So the special casting sand will soon be packed around the pattern for easily removal of pattern from the pattern from the casting methods. So potting powder is sprinkled over around it. So potting powder. So why we need to pour on the potting powder means. So let me split from the mold. Let me split from the dye from the mold. Okay, falling away within the pattern is finally removed from the sands. Okay. So next, casting sand is then shaken through the sheaves. Okay. So the dry sheets to remove the uneven size of the shands. Okay. So that only the fine particles fall around the pattern. So this is called facing sand, and it is must be fine so that the details on the pattern show up on the final castings. Okay. So next, once we fill the sand, it will help of the reamer to close back of the sands over the patterns. Okay. So the rack is then packed with the more casting sand and then ram it down the firmly using the ramming tools. The tool has to be two ends. One is a cylindrical end, which is top of the rammer. Okay. And another one is a point. Point or the can be used to packing sand the close of the pan. So the point means the bottom of the rammer. Okay. So next, excess material and the excess shands once we close pack we done with the rammer, the excess material will remove through the flat straight steel bar, which is called as a staggered half. Okay. So next, the entire track box going to be turned over to fill the to fix the core box. Okay. So next, so this is turn around our track box, then to fix the core box with the help of to fix the clamp pin through the locating pin. Okay. So next, to fix the sprue pins, one usually on the back of the pattern and the other to this side. These will eventually to provide on an entrance and the exit for the molten material, not only the aluminium, any kind of a material to the when it's poured into the sands. Okay. So once we fix the core box, then again the same method followed in the track box. Let me pour on the sands to then rammed over the sprue pins. Okay. So next, to generate a GAD systems. Why? This will help the molten metal to flow into the cavity left by the mold. Small tools are available or can easily be made to decor a variety of shapes in the casting sense. They are similar to the small trowels with the help of to generate a CAD system on the core box. Okay. So next, remove the solid patterns, okay, with the help of the spike materials, okay. So next, the cope, the top casting process placed back on the top of the track and the locating pins put into the positions. Before this is done, vent can be created using a thin piece of the welding rods. The pushing it through these sands. So why the pieces vent means this allows gases to escape once the molten metal is poured. Okay. So this is the final shape of sand casting methods. Okay. So this is a typical video of how the samples has been developed through the sand casting methods. Okay. So while we are applying the molten material through the pouring basins, the molten material was filled, the automatically molten material flow through the risers. Okay. So this is the final product of our molten material. So once solidification is over, the pouring basins and the risers part, this external part, excess materials which is going to be removal some other grinding machines. So these are all the hand tools which is support for the sand casting method. So bellows, lifter cleaners, hot and squares, and hand reamers, floor rammers, and hand riddles, screw pins, and trowels, and these kind of different geometries of trowels which is used for smooth shape developed in the casting molding methods. Smoother and corner slice. So these are employed to repair and finish the corners and the edges and the round and flat surfaces. So next, get cutters. Next, shovels. So these are all the advantages and disadvantages about the casting methods. So we can able to design the flexibilities. Okay. So flexibilities means flexibilities of complex shapes as well as in number of product we can able to produce. So reduced cost, which is quite cheaper compared to other manufacturing methods. So next one is a dimensional accuracy and versatilities in the productions. So what the disadvantage means, a lot of molten materials is wasted in the riser as well as cattings. Okay. So next disadvantage is castings may require for secondary process. So basically to remove the rough surfaces. Okay. So we can achieve through the smooth surface with the help of some secondary as well as third steps we need to adopt for the final casting methods. Okay. Thanks for your patience. Let me see on the next sessions. Okay. Thanks for your cooperation. Thanks for your patience. Thank you.